Donald Creed, June 26, 2009. Interstate 44, northeastern Oklahoma, 1:19 in the afternoon. The temperature on the asphalt exceeds 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is nearly 38 degrees Celsius of sweltering heat. Donald Creed, a 76-year-old truck driver for Associated Wholesale Grocers of Kansas City, has been behind the wheel for more than 10 hours. His 18-ton rig is moving at 100 kilometers per hour. Ahead of him, traffic has slowed to a stop because of a minor accident 8 minutes earlier. Drivers in front of him can see the jam. They are braking. Donald Creed does not brake. He does not change lanes. He does not slow down at all. There are no skid marks on the road before impact. Not one. His rig plows into the back of a Land Rover at full highway speed. The Land Rover is knocked into another car. That car is knocked off the highway. The truck continues forward. It hits a third vehicle, then a fourth, then a fifth. When the chain finally stops, 10 people are dead. Among them, a 7-year-old child. According to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, it became the worst loss of life in a single collision event in the history of the state. Donald Creed was not drunk. He was not on drugs. He was not speeding. The limit was 75 miles per hour, and he was doing 69. There was nothing wrong with his truck. There was nothing wrong with the road. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated for over a year. Their conclusion was precise. Donald Creed had fallen asleep. And in the seconds his brain went dark, 10 people were gone. This is the story of what happened inside his brain on that afternoon. And it is the story of what is happening inside yours right now if you are behind the wheel on too little sleep. Introduction. In our first video, we tracked what happens to your body when you sleep less than 6 hours, night after night. In our second video, we met Maureen Weston, a woman who did not sleep for 18 days. Today, we are not talking about days without sleep. We are talking about seconds. 4 seconds, to be exact, because that is how long a microsleep lasts. And at 65 miles per hour, 4 seconds is enough time for a vehicle to travel the full length of a football field with no one awake at the wheel. This video will take you inside the brain during that 4-second window. We will look at exactly what a microsleep is, why it happens, and why the person experiencing it almost never knows it occurred. We will trace the career of Donald Creed, a professional driver with decades of experience and a clean record. And we will follow what the NTSB investigators found in the 96 hours before his crash. We will also look at the numbers that the trucking industry does not advertise. And at the end, we will give you the exact signals your brain sends before a microsleep begins, so that you know what to do before it happens to you. Who was Donald Creed? Donald Creed was not reckless. He was not a young driver trying to push limits. He was 76 years old, a veteran of the road with a lifetime behind the wheel. He drove for Associated Wholesale Grocers, a Kansas City-based food distributor. His record was clean. He was not under any substances. His truck had been inspected and passed. By every external measure, he was exactly the kind of experienced, reliable driver you want on the road. But the NTSB investigators did not look at external measures. They looked at the 96 hours before the crash. What they found changed how the United States thinks about driver fatigue. Donald Creed had just returned from a 3-week vacation. The day of the crash, June 26, 2009, was his first long shift back. His shift began at 3 in the morning. To start a shift at 3 a.m., he would have needed to sleep at 8 o'clock the night before. The NTSB calculated that the maximum sleep opportunity he could have had was 5 hours. 5 hours! This is 3 to 4 hours less than his typical sleep requirement. He also had mild sleep apnea, a condition that fragments sleep and reduces its restorative quality. And he had been away from his regular schedule for 3 weeks. His circadian rhythm The biological clock that governs alertness had not yet adjusted back to a 3 a.m. start time. The body needs approximately 1 day to shift its internal clock by 1 hour. Creed's body was trying to operate at peak alertness during the hours it had been trained over decades to treat as nighttime. He had been on the road for more than 10 hours when the crash occurred. It was 1:19 in the afternoon. Due to sleep deprivation and disrupted biological clocks, at 1 o'clock on a scorching highway, Donald's brain was absolutely convinced it was 3 o'clock in the morning. What is a microsleep? Most people think falling asleep at the wheel looks a specific way. They picture drooping eyes, a slow swerve toward the shoulder, a head dropping to the chest. But something completely different happened to Donald Creed, and a microsleep looks entirely different. A microsleep is an involuntary episode of unconsciousness. It lasts between 1 and 15 seconds. It happens suddenly. It can happen with the eyes open. The person experiencing it has absolutely no awareness that it is occurring. From the outside, a driver having a microsleep can look completely awake. Their eyes may be open. Their hands may be on the wheel. Their posture may be upright, but their brain has stopped processing information. For those seconds, it has gone offline. During a microsleep, the thalamus, the brain's relay station, shuts down its input gates. Sensory signals stop reaching the cortex. The visual cortex goes quiet. The motor cortex becomes inactive. The prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and reaction, is no longer receiving or processing information. The brain is asleep. The body is in a vehicle traveling at highway speed, and the person has no idea what is happening inside them. That is the definition of a microsleep. Now, let us do the mathematics. A standard American football field is 100 yards long. That is approximately 91 meters. At 65 miles per hour, a vehicle travels approximately 95 feet per second. In 4 seconds, the minimum duration of a microsleep, that vehicle has covered 380 feet. That is the length of a football field. One football field with no driver, no braking, no steering, no awareness of what is in the road ahead. Make no mistake, Donald Creed's truck weighed 40,000 pounds. 40,000 pounds, traveling at 69 miles per hour for 4 seconds with no one home. Why the brain falls asleep at the wheel. The brain does not choose to have a microsleep. It is not a failure of willpower. It is not laziness. It is a survival response. Here is the mechanism. When you are sleep deprived, adenosine accumulates in the brain. Adenosine is a chemical byproduct of neural activity. Every hour you are awake, more of it builds up. It is, in effect, the chemical signal that tells your brain it is time to sleep. During healthy sleep, especially deep, slow-wave sleep, adenosine is cleared. When sleep is short or fragmented, it is not fully cleared. The next day, you begin with a higher baseline of adenosine than normal. Throughout the day, the level of adenosine continues to rise. There is a specific window, typically in the early afternoon, between 1 and 3 p.m., when the body experiences a natural dip in alertness. Researchers call it the post-lunch dip. It happens whether or not you have eaten lunch. It is a circadian feature, a hardwired trough in human alertness. Donald Creed's crash occurred at 1:19 p.m. He had been awake since approximately 2 in the morning. Donald had less than 5 hours of sleep. He had undiagnosed quality sleep from mild sleep apnea. Donald was at the lowest circadian alertness point of the entire day. Donald had been driving for more than 10 hours on a hot Oklahoma highway. Donald's brain was saturated with accumulated adenosine. Donald's brain was denied its clearing cycles and running at circadian bottom. Donald's brain simply took what it needed for 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. The numbers behind the wheel. Donald Creed is not an exception. He is a textbook case. The National Transportation Safety Board studied fatal heavy truck crashes for decades. Their finding? Driver fatigue was the most frequently cited probable cause. Driver fatigue appeared in 31% of all crashes that were fatal to the truck driver. 31%! Not alcohol, not mechanical failure, not weather. Fatigue. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration funded a survey of professional truck drivers. The result? 65% of truck drivers reported that they sometimes, or even often, feel drowsy while driving. Nearly half admitted they had actually fallen asleep at the wheel in the previous year. Not microsleep, fallen asleep while driving in the previous year. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recorded 684 deaths from drowsy driving-related crashes, and that was just in 2021 in the United States alone. These are the official data. Researchers believe the real number is significantly higher, because unlike alcohol, there is no roadside test for drowsiness. There is no breathalyzer for microsleep. A driver can pass every standard sobriety check and still be operating at the cognitive equivalent of legal intoxication from fatigue alone. A driver who has been awake for 18 hours performs at the same level as a driver with a blood alcohol content of 0.05%. A driver awake for 24 hours performs at the same level as a driver who is legally drunk. And unlike alcohol, the driver cannot feel it happening. That is the fundamental danger of driving fatigued. You are the last person to know. Inside the brain, the 4 seconds. Let us go back to 1:19 p.m. on Interstate 44. Let us go inside Donald Creed's brain in the seconds before impact. What does neuroscience tell us about what was happening there? In the minutes before the crash, if Donald Creed's EEG had been monitored, it would have shown increasing slow-wave intrusions. These are bursts of delta-frequency brain activity, the signature of deep sleep, occurring in a brain that is ostensibly awake. Researchers call this phenomenon local sleep. We covered it in the previous video in the context of Maureen Weston at day 6. At the wheel of a truck, local sleep does not require 6 days of deprivation to appear. It can appear after a single night of insufficient sleep. It can appear after 5 hours. In the seconds immediately before the microsleep, Donald's thalamus began shutting its gates. The thalamus is the brain's relay station. All sensory information passes through it on its way to conscious processing. When the thalamus gates close, nothing gets through. The cars slowing down ahead of him were visible to his eyes, but his brain had stopped receiving the signal. His visual cortex went quiet. His motor cortex stopped responding. His foot did not move toward the brake, not because he chose to keep driving, but because the command to move could not be generated. The brain had gone offline. For 4 seconds, or perhaps 3, perhaps 5, the truck was unguided. And then the front end of a 40-ton rig met a Land Rover at 69 miles per hour. The crash itself took less than 1 second. The microsleep that caused it, perhaps 4. In total, 5 seconds. 5 seconds to take 10 lives. What your brain tells you before it shuts down. This is the section that could save your life. Because microsleep does not arrive without warning. The warning signs are real. They are measurable. And most people ignore every single one of these warning signs. Warning sign 1, difficulty keeping your eyes focused on a fixed point. When the eyes begin drifting, losing the sharpness of their tracking, the thalamus is beginning to reduce its input. Warning sign 2, the sense that time has passed unexpectedly. If you look at a road sign and realize you have no memory of the previous kilometer, you have already had a microsleep. You did not feel it, but you were gone. Warning sign 3, The feeling that you are watching yourself from slightly outside your body. Researchers call this depersonalization. This is caused by the deactivation of the prefrontal cortex. Your rational brain is starting to go offline. Warning sign 4, microcorrections in steering. If your hands are making small, jerky adjustments to keep the vehicle straight, you are fighting active microsleeps. Your body is correcting for the brief losses of control you are not consciously aware of. Warning sign 5, a sudden sense of calm or peacefulness on the highway.
This sounds paradoxical, but drowsiness often feels pleasant. It does not feel like danger. It feels like relaxation. That pleasant feeling is your prefrontal cortex shutting down its anxiety function. You feel calm because the part of your brain that generates fear has gone offline first. If you feel any of these 5 things behind the wheel, you are not safe to drive. Not less safe, not slightly impaired. You are not safe to drive. The verdict and its aftermath. The NTSB investigation into the crash on the I-44 took over a year. Their final report, released September 28, 2010, was 80 pages long. The probable cause: acute sleep loss and circadian disruption in the truck driver. Contributing factors: mild sleep apnea, the absence of a fatigue management program at the company, and the agricultural hours of service exemption that had allowed the company to operate drivers without standard rest requirements. Donald Creed pleaded guilty to 10 counts of negligent homicide. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 10 years probation. He lost his commercial driver's license permanently. A civil settlement with the families of the victims reached $62.7 million. The youngest person who died that day was 7 years old. Donald Creed did not mean to kill anyone. He did not choose to fall asleep. His brain made that choice without asking him. That is precisely what makes the story so important. Because the same mechanism, the same adenosine buildup, the same circadian trough, the same local sleep intrusion operates in every brain that is running on too little sleep. Not only in a 76-year-old truck driver on a long Oklahoma highway. In every driver, in every profession, in every morning commute after a short night, in every parent driving children home after working a double shift. The only difference between Donald Creed and millions of people who drive fatigue every single day is that there happened to be stopped traffic ahead of Donald. And you, our highly valued viewer, please subscribe to 10th Heaven. By doing so, you will allow our young channel to gain the necessary momentum for growth. As we continue to explore this serious topic, let us transition straight to the protocol. The protocol. There are 5 things science tells us to do before driving on insufficient sleep. The first is the most important. Do not. If you have had fewer than 6 hours of sleep, do not drive. Not because you feel unsafe, because you cannot accurately feel unsafe. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that generates accurate self-assessment, is the first thing sleep deprivation impairs. You will feel fine. You may feel confident. That feeling is the symptom, not the proof. The second, if you must drive, take a caffeine nap before departing. Drink 1 full cup of coffee or espresso, then immediately close your eyes for 20 minutes. Caffeine takes 15 to 20 minutes to enter the bloodstream. The short sleep will clear adenosine from the brain. When you wake, both the sleep pressure and the caffeine will be working together. Research shows this combination outperforms either intervention alone. The third, drive in the morning rather than the afternoon. The post-lunch dip, the circadian alertness trough, peaks between 1 and 3 p.m. Donald Creed's crash occurred at 1:19 p.m. Morning driving, with the same total sleep, carries significantly lower microsleep risk. The fourth rule, stop every 90 minutes. Even when you do not feel tired, the fatigue that generates microsleep does not feel like fatigue. This fatigue feels like ordinary driving. The 90-minute rule exists precisely for the moments you cannot feel the need for it. The fifth rule: know the 5 warning signs we covered in the previous section. Write down these warning signs. Share them with anyone in your family who drives. They are not warnings of danger ahead. They are warnings that you are the danger.
Closing. On September 28, 2010, the NTSB published their final verdict on what happened on Interstate 44. They concluded with a word they had used many times before in reports on truck crashes: preventable. Every one of the 10 deaths on June 26, 2009, the NTSB concluded, was preventable. Not by better highway design, not by faster emergency response, not by stronger truck construction, by adequate sleep. The oldest person who died that day was 69 years old. The youngest was 7. They were in stopped vehicles, waiting for traffic to clear. They had done nothing wrong. They were simply ahead of a truck whose driver's brain had taken 4 seconds of rest that it had been denied for too long. 4 seconds. 1 football field. 10 lives. The brain does not negotiate its needs. The brain does not ask permission.
The brain does not check whether the timing is convenient. When the debt is too great, the brain collects. Sometimes quietly, in a bedroom at night. Sometimes at 1:19 in the afternoon on a turnpike in Oklahoma. Wherever it collects, the price is real. Do not let it collect its debt while you are behind a wheel.
Donald Creed drove professionally for decades. He was experienced. He was sober. He was under the speed limit, and his brain shut down anyway, which raises a question we have not yet answered in this series. What if the danger is not behind a wheel? What if it is behind a hospital bed? What happens to a surgeon who has been awake for 24 hours and he's holding a scalpel? What does their brain look like at hour 18 of a shift? What happens to the patient on the table? The numbers are in the research, and they are worse than you think. That is the next video. Subscribe to 10th Heaven so you don't miss it. What science cannot explain yet exists here.